Morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. Have you started Easter shopping yet? Holy cow, the Easter chocolate is very expensive. I started yesterday and I thought, goodness, this is more expensive than last year. 90-day tariff pause. Bond market? What bond market? Everything's fine. This was all part of the plan. We just don't understand 6D chess. I'm sure it's fine, but I've got a couple of different breakdowns for you about what Trump did yesterday, and everybody's putting a shining, happy, smiley face on it. At the same time, like, there are a lot of wins to stack up, but also if he didn't do what he did with the 90-day pause and the reversal and all the rest of it, maybe a depression would have happened. Who knows? So it's very interesting to watch all of this. I've got lots and lots of color on it because it's very interesting, because we're watching something happen that is not easy. And sometimes to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. Okay. Panama canal deals coming closer to an end. So Donald Trump is moving to fix that problem. And China is the common denominator. China is a huge, huge problem. And also, when we start talking about Carney, China makes an appearance in that conversation as well. $1 million worth of drugs were found in a Manitoba prison. But it's all marijuana. So they give you the institutional value, but not the street value. I thought, holy smoke, the institutional value of this? What's the retail value? How much did that stuff cost? $200 maybe? Anyway, how many ounces of weed are in the prisons? And why are we pretending that that's not a legal recreational thing that people do now in Canada? What's your feeling on drugs in prisons? We'll talk about that later in the show. Carney wants to keep foreign aid and not cut taxes. And he actually says, Pierre Poilievre will probably cut foreign aid and use that money to cut your taxes. And then he makes kind of a disgusting face, like, that's gauche, he shouldn't do that. And he says, we'll maintain foreign aid. So he wants to send your money to Ukraine. And is it a campaign ad for Poilievre that he's running? Like, I don't understand. We'll watch that. Endorsements for Poilievre versus Carney, and there are a lot of endorsements for Poilievre, and the Chinese endorsements for Carney keep rolling in. China uses a betting platform to influence voting and so much more. There's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to talk about tariffs. This from the White House made me think, that's a little weird. It's a little authoritarian, a little bit obey in capital letters, right? The White House says in all caps, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. This is April 9th. 3:52 p.m. So, okay, this is Canada retaliated, by the way. Whoops. Sorry, guys. We didn't mean to retaliate. Hi, guys. Could we undo all of that? Kirk says Donald Trump has announced a 90-day pause on tariffs to negotiate with all the countries who reached out, except the countries that retaliated against the United States with tariffs. Womp womp. Who are these countries? China and Canada. Hi. As of right now, tariffs are in place on Canada, and both the Liberals and the CPC supported this. Canada is run by idiots. Want, want. Here's Donald Trump. He says, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charged to China by the United States of America to 125% effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the United States and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, and at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I've authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Trump is responding. He's being flexible, he says. CTV News is reporting White House says Canada exempt from Trump's baseline reciprocal tariffs. So Mark Carney's position is his whole election campaign is kind of being pulled out from under him. It doesn't matter, though. He's nonplussed. He doesn't care. He is going to run on that anyway. Trump man, orange man bad. And he's going to be supported by Jagmeet Singh and the Canadian media, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Here's Trump being asked. He was introducing NASCAR champions, and he's being asked about the tariff reversal. And he says, be cool, man. Be cool. You just got to be cool. So here's Trump talking about being cool. Here we go.
You started the morning saying be cool, and then just a few hours later, there was a pause put in on the tariffs. Can you walk us through your thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause?
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know. They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75. And they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen.
We'll let it go here. He does respond. He says, "Oh, the bond market. You know, people getting yippy. People were just getting yippy. That's it. They were just getting yippy." I forgot to change the title on the stream, so apologies about that. The title for today's show is "Be Cool, Be Cool." Here is these guys, and they're giving a little bit of color. We'll listen as long as it makes sense, but they're talking about what Trump is actually doing is targeting China, and it's a Cold War, and he may beat China without firing a shot. Really, and I mean, not that I'm skeptical. I don't think I'm skeptical about this. I think this is an interesting lens to view the past 6 weeks under, and I don't think it's far off from being correct. Here we go.
News: Donald Trump just announced a 90-day pause on all of the sanctions that he rolled out. I think he rolled some stuff back to 10%. This is not Donald Trump capitulating. This is the kind of deal he was looking for. You know how I know? Because countries are coming to the table to negotiate, and China is still on the list. 125% tariff still on China right now. He went from 104 to 125. He went after China. That is the bad actor. He gives everybody else a little bit of time to come to the table, and guess what? It's not threats of tariffs right now. It's, I put them on you before. I took the heat from our stock market, and I'll do it again. You sure you don't want to negotiate? Donald Trump just played this perfectly. 100%.
There's a lot of fire there. I don't know if I have that fire to bring to the table, but yeah, I just want to walk through. We are in a Cold War with China. We have been for some time. This is the clearest indication of that yet. I'll admit, like you, I reached out to you the night that these were levied. I said, this is kind of confusing to me.
Both confused.
A little bit confusing. But I think the turning point where I realized that really what he was doing was how quickly the Vietnamese came to the table to negotiate. Trump realized that we are in a watershed moment where countries are going to have to choose China or the United States. China has been screwing us. They've been screwing the world since their ascension to the WTO. Who knows this better than anybody? Their Asian neighbors. Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Philippines, they all came quickly.
Very quickly.
So this has always been about China. It took me a little longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It took everybody, some political commentators I won't mention, up until 2 minutes ago to get on board with this. This is fantastic.
You were crying about it yesterday. All of a sudden you think he's a genius,
know who
Bill
you
Ackman?
Are. You know
Come on.
Oh, Bill Ackman, I guess.
He's not
Calling people out. Bill Ackman. I don't pay attention to Bill Ackman. I don't know who he is. Here is Chief Nerd, and this is the Besant. I always get his name wrong. One of the secretaries and the secretary of press secretary, and they're discussing this as well. And they say, listen, do you know how much negotiation leverage? Art of the deal is you ask for way more than you think you'll ever get, and then you settle for what you wanted in the first place, right? Basically, that's the art of the deal. And here are these two talking about what Trump did, and they said, like, do you realize what has happened? Here we go.
Can you explain more of the decision making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why?
They said, I don't know if you can hear it properly. It's kind of quiet, but they're louder. But they say, can you explain the decision making? These tariffs came in 15 hours ago. Why the reversal? It seems like chaotic, et cetera, et cetera.
Pause now. What led to that?
No. Again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago. The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we've just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
There you go. So Trump wants to make sure the trade is done right. And how can you make sure that it's done right? You do it yourself. So Trump's going to have a hand in all of this trade personally. Very interesting stuff. Unusual Whale says EU to pause counter tariffs on the United States for 90 days. So reciprocal tariff pausing. And Mark Carney says, this is last night, I do believe, although 9:52 p.m. Yeah, I think this is from last night's rally. So Melissa says, at the Carney rally tonight, Mark Carney recommitted to fighting the Americans with money and lawyers, all while being interrupted by a pro-Palestinian protester. His handling of the heckler, not great. Usually, being heckled as a stand-up comedian is really hard if you don't know how to handle the crowd. And what you have to do is you have to beat the heckler and get the crowd on your side, and the crowd will cheer you and drown out the heckler, and the heckler loses and then presumably slinks off to the bar to get a drink and drown his sorrows, right? And in this case, Carney's helpers in the crowd start chanting Carney, 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 and everybody starts chanting that kind of half-heartedly, but his handlers had to get him out of it. Nothing worse than somebody who doesn't have command of the crowd who says, I'd really like to speak now. Please, I'd like to speak. It's my turn to speak. That's the worst way to handle a heckler. Oh, well, people paid to come and see me speak. It's the worst. So that's what Carney does. Here we go.
So we're going to fight. We fight the Americans with what they understand. They understand money, they understand lawyers, and they understand Fox News. So we put counter tariffs on the Americans. We put counter tariffs on the Americans. Okay, I've come a long way. These people have waited a long time, and I would like to speak. Understand the point. Thank you.
Weak. Absolutely weak. Just terrible. You've got to have people put you in. It's hard. Like, public speaking is hard. Being in a position where you're answering questions and you have to have your mind on 10 or 12 different files all at once is hard. If Donald Trump can do it, Mark Carney can do it. He's supposed to be smart, right? So all of this stuff where he is not able to solve these problems, where he's just kind of, he doesn't sound smart, where he's just kind of saying stuff that somebody who doesn't have any experience would say. It feels like he doesn't prep for this stuff. It feels like he says his speech and people go, great speech, sir. And there's nobody trying to disrupt him. There's nobody trying to get him off his game. So when it actually happens in real life, he doesn't have any practice. You need to practice this kind of stuff, right? So I don't know. And stand-up comedians and people who do this job for real, right? Not bankers who parachute into the top job. You practice that as you're coming up. And if you don't get it right, you don't get to the next level. You don't get to talk to big crowds like this. You have to be able to manage the crowd, right? And not rely on your handlers to whip up a Carney chant, right? Weak, just weak. Here is Peter Schiff, and he says, it looks like Trump has already surrendered in what may go down as the shortest global trade war in history. I guess once he saw how badly the U.S. was losing, He needed to find a graceful way to save face. DC Drano says Trump just forced 75 plus countries to negotiate to the negotiation table to fix our trade deficits on a tight timeline. That's a huge win. But for your comedic interest, here's Peter Schiff's take. And it's interesting. And I think that that's accurate. Here's a little bit more deeper color on what exactly Trump is doing and what he's accomplished. This is this is a comparison being made to Reagan, right? And yesterday I was saying peace through strength was Reagan. I grew up hearing that, right? G.I. Joe, man, the real American heroes. Peace through strength, kid. Every day after school, it was Transformers and G.I. Joe, and then Wings. Anyway, Reagan broke the USSR then, and Trump is breaking China now, says this guy. Says, who is this guy? Whoever this Western Standard artist or author is. Like a train wreck, it's hard to take your eyes off the total carnage in the markets. I was planning on following up the whatever, but that got sidelined the moment the markets reversed 6% in under an hour on the China tariff news. These new tariffs aren't just economic policy, they're the other side of the coin we've been discussing in recent posts. Yes, they're about making America build stuff again, but they're also about winning a war with China without firing a single bullet. If it works, it doesn't just level the playing field, it sets China back 30 years and preserves American economic dominance, which means low interest rates. At midnight, in about 35 minutes as I write this, Trump's retaliatory tariffs go on China at 104%, and the gloves are off. Trump's objective is clear: destroy the Chinese economy within 3 years, or cripple it so severely that the Communist Party collapses under its own weight. Think the USSR, except this time we aren't using tanks, planes, or alliances. We are using economic warfare, tariffs, blunt, brutal, and absolute. For decades, China grew rich by flooding foreign markets with subsidized overproduction: steel, solar, electronics, batteries, everything. The strategy worked because the West let it happen. Wall Street profited. The WTO, World Trade Organization, shrugged. Politicians clapped for low prices as entire domestic industries were gutted. This is an epic clip from the White House today. Trump has now slammed the door shut. 104% tariff, now 125%. Doesn't tweak prices, it breaks their business model. Yes, it breaks their business model. If you sell a product and you expect a profit, so your cost of the product is $20, you sell it for $60, you're expecting a $40 profit, and now you pay 100% tariff on that, your product model, your business model is broken. You can't do that anymore. So you have to do something else. Inflation models can be built and speculated on, but this is economic war, and Trump doesn't care. He is building a wall so high that Chinese goods are effectively shut out of the U.S. market. Right now, China has only 3 responses. All of them are poison. First, they could capitulate, stop the subsidies, float the yuan, open their markets, protect their intellectual property, in other words, surrender, but that's impossible. The CCP governs through control. If they give up economic command, they lose the ability to steer the system and probably lose the country with it. Second, they could print money, launch massive domestic stimulus, flood the system with credit to offset local or lost exports, but they've already tried and it's failing. Local governments are suffocating under debt. Developers like Evergrande have defaulted on hundreds of billions of dollars in obligations, and entire sectors, especially real estate, are zombified. Print too much now and the yuan collapses, capital flees, and confidence shatters. Third, they could try to find new customers, replace U.S. demand with the EU, India, Japan, South Korea, but even this is slipping away. Germany is waking up to the threat of Chinese green tech wiping out its last industrial edge. India's Make in India campaign is a nationalist firewall, and Japan and South Korea have no interest in letting Beijing dominate the Pacific economy. If Trump pulls just a few of these allies into alignment by Easter, 10 more days to slow the spread, China is out of options. No exports surplus, no way to fund international subsidies, no growth engine left. And here's where it gets dangerous, not just economically, but socially. China's youth unemployment rate now unofficially exceeds 25%. The government stopped publishing the data in mid-23 because the numbers were too damning. Entire generations of college graduates are stuck at home, jobless, directionless, and increasingly disillusioned. Worse, the demographic clock is ticking. China's population is shrinking faster than any major country in modern history. They passed their peak in 2022. By 2050, they'll lose over 100 million people. The working age population is collapsing. The median age is rising. There are entire cities, tens of them, built for millions, now sitting empty. And it has 3 examples. Kangbashi, Inner Mongolia, was built to house a million people. It holds a fraction of that. The second one was designed to mimic Paris, complete with Eiffel Tower replica, and it's now mostly vacant. Across the country, real estate is 20 to 30% of GDP when you include construction, land sales, and housing services. But the bubble has popped, and the ghost cities aren't filling up. What about Canada? What's the percentage of housing is our GDP? I think it's probably pretty high. And then there's the gender bomb. Thanks to decades of one-child policy, their sex-selective abortions, China has an estimated 35 million more men who will never have family, or more men than women. That's tens of millions of young unmarried men who will never have families, wives, or children. No stake in the system, no hope of traditional fulfillment, just anger, nationalism, and idle time. The sex doll business is booming over there, and he's not kidding. The CCP knows this is dangerous. Historically, surplus male populations drive violence, war, and instability, and the pressure cooker is now coupled with unemployment, demographic collapse, and internal isolation. None of this is theoretical, it's real, and for the first time in decades, the United States is actively accelerating the breakdown. Back in the USSR, says back in the late 80s, the Soviet Union hit a similar wall. Its economy was brittle, over-leveraged, and failing to deliver. At the same time, global capital flows were shifting. The first cracks of what would become the Asian currency crisis were forming. The world was waking up to the limits of central planning, debt-fueled illusions, and state-directed inefficiency. Ultimately, the USSR couldn't purge its leverage, and when oil collapsed, it had nothing left to stand on. There had to be a purge of liquidity and leverage out of the system. The law of diminishing returns comes for us all, to quote my good friend Mark Rosen. That was true in 1989, and it's true again right now. China's model was always unsustainable. It only worked in a world of zero interest rates, unquestioned access to Western markets, and political protection from the Davos class enablers. Trump just broke the world. WHO, WTO, NGOs, WEF, all of it. And unless China reforms, which it won't, or collapses, which is now increasingly likely, this is how the Cold War ends, not with a bang, not with a bomb, but with a tariff, a currency spiral, and 35 million angry young men with nothing left to lose. I just think that's an interesting angle, and it's a lens that people are not talking about whatsoever. And I think that it, again, accurate. I think that there's something to it, and I think that Trump operates like art of war. And Art of the Deal is based on Art of War. And in Art of War, it's make sure your enemy doesn't understand what you're doing, right? Cloud what's going on with other things to confuse your enemy, and so on and so forth. And I think that the fog of war is being created by Trump, not by accident, but absolutely on purpose. And he's using it to his advantage. And he's using it to his advantage in trade, in tariffs, to use the tariffs as a tool, because previously, other presidents would set a tariff once and never think about it again. And Trump is using it as a guitar string, right? And he's trying to play a symphony just with one string, moving his finger up and down the frets quickly and playing the string. And I mean, like, tariffs are one of the strings that he's playing. There are others, right? And I'm just saying he's using this to amplify his edge, right? And so here's Donald Trump Army says, just in, Amazon cancels inventory orders from China due to tariffs. Right? Interesting. Steven says, you've been watching the greatest economic master strategy from an American president in history. Maybe. Does it feel like that? Does it feel historic? Does it feel like you're watching history? Maybe. Eric says, Scott Bessent issues a new declaration. It's 55 seconds. We'll listen to it. Here we go.
For too long, financial policy has served large financial institutions at the expense of smaller ones. No more. No more. This administration aims to give all banks the chance to succeed, whether it's JP Morgan or your local mortgage and loan. It aims to get capital to Americans who need it by getting bureaucracy out of the way. For the last 4 decades, basically since I began my career in Wall Street has grown wealthier than ever before, and it can continue to grow and do well. But for the next 4 years, the Trump agenda is focused on Main Street. It's Main Street's turn. It's Main Street's turn to hire workers. It's Main Street's turn to drive investment. And it's Main Street's turn to restore the American dream.
There you go. So Main Street's turn, he says. And this is Trump calling Adam Schiff a watermelon head. And I just thought it was funny. It doesn't really fit here. It doesn't really fit anywhere, but it's funny. Here we go.
Adam Shifty Shifts. Can you believe this guy? He's got the smallest neck I've ever seen. And the biggest head. We call him watermelon head. I'd say, how could that big fat face stand on a neck that looked like this finger? How can it? It was the weirdest thing. It's a mystery. Nobody can understand it. But he's one of the most dishonest human beings I've ever seen. And, you know, how we can allow people like that to run in office is a shame, but we did.
Schiff was threatening to bring insider trading investigation against Trump because apparently Trump tweeted something out that tipped off his insiders that he was going to do this. So I don't know. Who knows? But maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But all of this is interesting, and we spent a lot of time on it. So we're going to get into the election now. So Mark Carney is China's man, right? It's very interesting. Here is Omar Al-Ghabra. Remember that guy? He used to be a transport minister for Justin Trudeau. And is he still an MP? He might be an MP. I thought he stepped down, but it doesn't really matter. He's been in the fold, and he does political operative stuff all over the place. And he says, stunning Poly market is giving Mark Carney an 80% chance of becoming the prime minister. And Joe says Carney at nearly 80% now on Poly market. And why do you think that is? Why are the betting markets betting on Carney? Why do you think that is? Sam Cooper gives us some information about why. Sam says, for people looking at the betting site with 80% choosing Carney, it would be precisely within the realm of precedent if Chinese Communist Party crime networks were skewing that. Check out my report from Taipei. Taiwan's intelligence disclosed this scoop in 2023. And here it is. He described a complex scheme in which Beijing funded and used organized crime gambling rings to influence votes for certain candidates in Taiwan. I will share an example that has been happening in Taiwan and probably elsewhere, including Canada, Jan said. This is a very classic tactic of China's election interference. According to Jan, the scheme involves underground betting on election candidates and how the gambling odds can influence actual results at the ballot boxes. In the lead up to elections, there will always be illegal election operations in Taiwan, so China tends to take advantage of such operations, and they will work with the operators from these election gambling rings, Jan said. Beijing will work with such election gambling operators, telling them if you can get more people to wager on this specific candidate, they will get very high cash payoff, Jan said. And when the operators spread the word in the betting community, the voters will flock to support this specific candidate. Chinese agents also inject funds into these underground betting operations that influence voting results, Jan said. So Omar Al-Ghabra is in on the grift. If you're standing there doing a 3-shell game, right, and you think you're following this whole thing, Omar is the guy in the crowd who comes and bumps you, and you have to turn your head, and he says, oh, sorry, and you say, oh, right, and he's disrupted your concentration, and you've lost track of the thing that you were following, and now you've lost the shell game, right? Because of Omar. And so Omar is an operative. Omar is helping out, right? And you shouldn't believe Omar, and you shouldn't believe the betting markets because it's a classic CCP election rigging strategy. Here's Senator Ashley Moody, and she says, 2 weeks ago, I introduced a bill to deny student visas to Chinese nationals because the Chinese Communist Party passed a law requiring those students, University of Waterloo, I'm looking at you, to cooperate with intelligence gathering. The number caught here and arrested on our buses has exploded. So China is sending students to be mules for information, and they may be innocent students, but just being Chinese, they now have to work with the Chinese communists because otherwise the Chinese communists might kill their family back in China. And I'm not even overstating that. I wish I were. Here we go.
I filed a bill yesterday to deny now student visas to Chinese students because China has just passed a law that now requires every national to gather intelligence, including Chinese students here studying, gather intelligence and report back. How do we not pass a law that prevents student visas in that respect? I mean, in the past few years, we've had an explosion of Chinese students that were caught gathering evidence or gathering information on military bases, on college campuses. How do we as lawmakers, policymakers not do that? I filed a bill yesterday to deny now.
How do we ignore that? How do we not respond to this? She says. Andy Lee shares this from Chinese media. Mark Carney discussing China's important leadership role in climate change on China's Central Television during China Development Forum meetings in Beijing on March 25th, 2024. That's last year. A year from being on Chinese TV to prime minister. That's got to be some kind of record. Here's Mark Carney.
particularly around China's leadership in climate change and the further acceleration that's necessary for that. That's a crucial discussion, as is the discussion around AI and really the application of AI. We see China's leadership there in deployment of AI technologies, which is in many respects unique, and we can all learn from that and work together.
与会嘉宾纷纷表示 There you go. Right? Real Chinese TV, piped in direct on Canada Poly. Kelly says, Carney won't say where he pays income taxes. I pay mine in Canada. Mark, can you say the same? Apparently not. So that's interesting, right? This is a Toronto Sun article. Mark Carney is less than clear on where he pays personal taxes. So yeah, you know, in places that I've lived. Could you name those places? Next question. Son of a Bench says, Mark Carney tried to say cutting foreign aid is a negative thing because it could produce tax cuts for Canadians like Poilievre is promising. For real. No word of a lie. Here we go.
Okay. So the short answer is no. We will. My government will not cut foreign aid, and we will be releasing our platform soon, so you can see that. That is a direct contrast to Mr. Poilievre, who will not just cut foreign aid, but taking his cue from the Americans, he will eliminate foreign aid. He will eliminate foreign aid to those most affected around the world, most punished around the world. He'll eliminate foreign aid by extension to the Middle East, to Ukraine as well. And he will use the money for other purposes, presumably for tax cuts, which is normally what he does when he cuts programs.
My name's Pierre Poilievre, and I approve this message. Like, what? Yeah, he'll probably cut foreign aid and, you know, give those evil Canadians a tax cut or something like that, says Mark Carney, vying for Prime Ministership of Canada. He wants to send all of your money to Ukraine. Here is a minute and a half of Andrew Scheer telling you why Mark Carney is terrible. We know about all of this already. It's just an attack ad. I'm not going to play it because I'm already long. So we've got to get through this, and I want to get I want to get the election stuff done before finishing. Anyway, before going off the stream, hopefully, but we'll see. We're already at half an hour, so. But Andrew Scheer brings up some good points. We'll listen to a minute of it. Here we go. It would be bad for Canada. It has been 1 day since the last incident of too fast speed. I thought that I had gone through this and checked it out. He says, give me a minute and a half and you'll understand how terrible Mark Carney is. I think we all understand how terrible Mark Carney is, but this is another plank in the conservative attack against him. With legitimate criticisms, I think so far. Here we go.
It would be bad for Canada and bad for you personally. And it's going to take me 90 seconds to prove it to you. Let's start with the Liberal lost decade. Canada's economy is weak and vulnerable to the US because of Liberal decisions that chased away billions of dollars in investments. Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau canceled major pipeline projects like Northern Gateway and Energy East. We have no way to get Western Canadian energy into Eastern Canadian markets without going through the United States. And Mark Carney supports this.
Maybe up as much as half of oil reserves, proven reserves, need to stay in the ground if we're going to get to where we are.
This is bad news for jobs, bad news for your mutual fund. But it's great news for Donald Trump. He gets the jobs and investments, and Canada gets weaker.
Frankly, probably would do better with the Liberal than the Conservative, if you want to know the truth.
Mark Carney says he's going to keep the industrial carbon tax. That means that steel workers in Canada have to compete against American steel companies that don't have to pay the carbon tax.
Does that not ultimately trickle down? No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, you know, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd?
On crime, he also supports the easy bail policies that cause the crime wave that's plaguing Canadian cities. And on housing, Carney is doubling down on the same policies that spent billions but didn't actually build new homes. Now remember, those are his words. That's what he's actually saying about what he's going to do. Look how quickly we could dispel all the myths about Mark Carney.
I don't know. There's a lot of wasted time in that minute and a half. I think that you could have done better there, Mr. Scheer. Holly Doan is reporting federal government, which one is this? Employment and social something or other. It says they tripled the spending on consultants in a single year to $311 million because no employee was available. Huh, that's weird. The department has 34,000 employees, but they couldn't find employees, so they had to outsource for millions. Hundreds of millions. Incredible. Leviathan says a terrorist sympathizer interrupts Mark Carney's event in Calgary, with which gasps of "oh goodness" coming from the crowd and attendees laughing at him. So the only reason I'm really playing you this clip is because the reaction of the crowd is they're all rolling their eyes at him. They're all saying, "Oh my gosh, come on! Like we don't need to worry about this here," and or her. I don't know who it is. It sounds like a Karen. Here we go.
Mr. Carney, there's a genocide happening in Palestine. Will you?
Everybody in the room groans. Oh my God, shut up.
Endorse an arms embargo. There's a genocide in Palestine.
When they chant for Trump, they sound enthusiastic. When they chant for Carney, they sound like they're responding to somebody saying, "There's a genocide happening." Carney. So ridiculous. No says Carney has pledged today to make Canada the world's leading energy superpower. At the bottom of the lengthy announcement around critical minerals and clean energy projects, there is a sentence on the oil and gas sector. We will work with the oil and gas sector to reduce their emissions in a cost-effective and efficient manner. We cannot lose sight of our obligation to address climate change while ensuring the long-term competitiveness of Canada's energy sector. So the too long didn't read is no more pipelines if you elect Mr. Carney. Okay. And I'm not going to go into reading it. We've already read the important part on here, but it is in here. And Mark Carney is trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. Here is more color on oil and what Mark Carney is going to do. And she's saying he's going to be an enemy of anybody who tries to develop Canada's natural resources.
I'm not a fan. I would be a fan if I was really into green energy and net zero as an economic policy. Then I would have loved his energy plan today. It would have been great. I'm somebody who believes that Canada's economic prosperity and future and things like productivity and our competitiveness is tied directly to using our natural resources to the most of their ability. And Carney isn't somebody who thinks that. Carney is somebody who thinks that our oil reserves should stay in the ground. He said that. Carney is somebody who will not repeal Bill C-69, the bill that, you know, the energy sector has told us, if you do not repeal it, we cannot build pipelines. So Mark Carney is okay with Canadian gas and oil going down through the States, getting refined, and then coming back up through Canada, having Canada import oil from Saudi Arabia. Our oil is cleaner, our oil is more ethical, and Mark Carney treats Canadian oil like it's a dirty, bad thing. And I don't think the Prime Minister of Canada should do that, and I don't think that his energy plan today said anything different. The only time oil was mentioned in his press release when he was talking about making oil's emissions less, and he also won't repeal the emissions cap. So I don't know how any of that squares between actually investing and supporting Canadian oil as a priority for the Prime Minister.
Okay.
I'm not a fan.
There you go. I've got to shut off the stream because it's just too long. And if I don't shut off the stream, it's gonna be too long. But we're gonna get into Pierre Poilievre and the NDP. The NDP are ridiculous. Jagmeet Singh says he'd rather deal with China than Donald Trump. So that's how ridiculous and out of touch he is. And the Conservatives are asking, do you believe the polls? They've got sweaters. They've got big banners that say, do you believe the polls? So there's lots going on. Poilievre's getting lots of people out, so on and so forth. But we've got to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you tomorrow. For everybody else, we'll carry on with what's going on in the Conservative side of things for now, and then PPC as well. Robert says, another brewing controversy. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.